My name's Ophélie. I'm here with Desiree, Diaz, and Isobel, Ripley. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you all for being here tonight. I'm really happy to be back at Finley's with Sia. She's our amazing host, and this is where we did our first event, which was a really special night. So thank you all for coming back. It's so nice to be with such a large group of women, and thank you also to the men who are here tonight. I think that hopefully you'll feel like you actually will have learned something. So the underlying theme behind all these events, so this is our third event, is the idea of connecting to our bodies again and having more self-awareness. And I always choose these topics because for me they've been really life-changing, and I really believe that when you take the time, take a second just to sit back and listen to your body, that some really amazing things can happen. And this topic is no different because, so the topics we talk about are often around ancient wisdom or practices, and sometimes through more modern research. And this is sort of this ancient wisdom that approximately 50% of the population have within us, which is the menstrual cycle. And it's often vilified in some cultures, and in some it's still celebrated, which is great. But in our Western culture, it's very much swept under the rug, or at least it has been until very recent times, where now more and more people are talking about it. And I think there's a lot of stigma still around it, a lot of shame, a lot of taboo. And so I think I'm really happy to be here talking with you about it. And I think also it seems like quite an obvious topic because it's something that we learn about in biology, and it's the reproductive system, and that's just the way that we have children. But actually, even when I was talking to friends about it, so other women, a lot of them didn't even know what happened biologically during this cycle. And yeah, so I found that fascinating already that people didn't know that. And then on a more personal level, I used to get, and this is also why I wanted to talk about this tonight, I used to get really, really bad period pains, and I did for about 10 years of my life, apart from once when I was falling in love with someone, and then for a month I just didn't, well, for that month I didn't have any period pains, and I already found that really fascinating that could have such an impact. But then I kept getting them again, and about a year ago I wasn't very happy with my life, and I had long COVID, and I decided to quit my job, and I went abroad and went traveling and did a yoga course, and there I stopped getting period pains, which was it made such a huge difference for me, and it was such a huge thing. And I think it's because I really learned, outside of sort of the paradigm and structure that we live in today, to take the time to really sit back and listen to what my body was trying to say to me. And this is quite corny, but in a way it was like me falling in love with myself, in a way. And then at the same time, so already that was fascinating, that something could change so quickly, just from what was going on the outside, and that happening to me inside. And then at the same time I met a woman who told me that she thought that the basis for feminism, for female empowerment, should be the menstrual cycle, and more specifically the idea of listening to it, understanding it, and living according to it, and sort of not suppressing it, which is something that we do a lot today, and especially in this world where we're taught that if we want to be equal to men, we have to behave like them within a structure that's been built for them, and so we often taught to suppress the parts of ourselves that make us women. So that I also found fascinating, and that led me to research this more, and that's why I invited Izzy and Desiree tonight to go more in depth into this topic. And first, before I do, I'm going to ask you all a few questions, which I like to do just to see where everyone's at. So the first question is, can you raise your hand if you know what phase of your cycle you're in now, whether you're in contraception or not? Okay. And for those who are, do you feel connected to these different phases?
Nope. Yeah.
That's good. And do you, for, I guess, people who menstruate here, do you feel like it's a burden? Does anyone raise your hand if you feel like it's a burden? Okay. And if you've ever felt shame around it, if you feel shame still? But even if you had in the past. Do you find it easy to follow the rhythm of society with a menstrual cycle? The sort of work-life balance?
No.
And this is, I guess, more for everyone, but do you feel like you know how to listen to your body and that you have the tools?
No. I do. Sometimes.
And then the last question, this is for the men who are here. Do you know anything? Well, raise your hand if you know.
Do you know anything?
Raise your hand. If you know anything about the cycle, can you raise your hand? Yeah, thanks guys. And do you imagine that it affects your own personal lives? Please raise your hand if you think it does impact you. Okay, thank you to everyone. So, to my amazing guests. So, we're going to have just approximately a 45-minute chat, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. So, we'll see what parts you guys want to talk about afterwards. Yeah, so Izzy, we met through Instagram, and I really loved, I wanted to have you on since I first had the idea for this project, like 6 months ago, but then you moved to South Africa, so I had to wait until you came back. And you are, I just love your, well, I found you on Instagram, and I loved your message and the way you were so passionate about what you're trying to say. And you're a FAM instructor, which is Fertility Awareness Method, and you're also just in general menstrual cycle awareness educator. Would you be happy to tell us a bit more about your journey and why it's so important to you?
Okay, here we go. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, I guess so. The beginning of my journey starts with contraception and being like 16 and having a boyfriend and taking the first steps to take responsibility for my fertility and going to the doctor and Googling my options and going and saying I want to have the pill, trying that for a series of years, kind of on and off through when I was studying at a dance school. And that first step I found very empowering because I felt like I was it represented kind of stepping into starting to understand what it might be to be like a woman and to take responsibility for my health and my well-being and my body. And then towards the end of like my dance training, I suppose, I started feeling a bit like I felt so connected to my body in so many ways through dance and movement, but it felt a little bit like there was still this element of myself which I didn't understand, and that was to do with this kind of cyclical mental health kind of ups and downs that I would have, and it went through a period of time when I thought, okay, maybe I'm like bipolar or something, because I would have periods of feeling absolutely fine and great, and then periods of just being like completely depression, anxiety, that type of thing. And then, so so that was kind of going alongside this like contraception journey as well. I tried lots of different things. I tried the Nuva ring, I tried the copper coil, and all of them there was just something that was just from the extremes of kind of just a feeling of like, I don't really like this, to like the extremes of when I tried the Nuva ring, like extreme kind of like self-hatred actually, and like I gained a lot of weight and I felt really like heavy and kind of like just not myself, and I felt like for like 3 months just completely like rock bottom almost, and so then I was like, okay, I want to try the copper coil, and with that for the 9 months that I had it, I had low level kind of pain. I say kind of pain, it was pain. Low level pain in my uterus the whole time. And so then I just kind of got to the point I was like, none of these are working for me. And I really felt just, I felt like there was no other option. I felt like it was either I had to be on some kind of medical birth control, or I was going to get pregnant and I was irresponsible. I didn't know that there was another option. And then I read a book which many people have read, I think, called Period Power. And in that book it explained that fertility awareness method is a valid form of natural birth control. And I was like, oh my god, I have to know more about this thing. So I started learning about it, and came off of the coil which I was on at that time, and it just not only became a method of birth control which I realised does work, but also, and kind of more importantly even, gave me this like deep understanding of my mental health and also my physical health, also my maybe I'll go into it more later, but like the ebbs and flows of my emotions, my sexuality. It just gave me a method of understanding myself. And then I was like, this is so amazing, I want to share it with other people. So I'm now qualified to be a fertility awareness method teacher. Yeah, and that's all I'll say about it for now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's so nice to have, I think, to share about these things. I think a lot of people go through this and don't really talk about it, or don't really, as you were saying, don't really understand why you're feeling so horrendous, and you think something's wrong with you. So thank you for sharing that. Desiree, we also met through Instagram, and I just loved you have a really beautiful and natural take on the feminine, and I guess that's what you do, where you're a herbalist, a witch and a healer, and you really hold space for the feminine. So I've been to a few of your moon circles, which have been amazing, and you also work with trauma in the womb. Would you be happy to tell us a bit about your journey and why it's been important for you to get to this point now?
Absolutely. My voice is not normally like this, by the way.
I think that's great.
But yeah, hopefully it will stay. Yeah, my journey, it's been so lovely to meet you and for you to experience some of the things that I do. My journey started really young in terms of the spirituality. Was very connected through my mom, that just raised me being very spiritual. So there was always that deeper connection in that way. When I started bleeding, it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. I absolutely hated it. I had so much fear every month that my period would come, because I just grown up with my type of pain being I would be sick to the point of blacking out from just my period. And just learning that doctors were just like, that's just how it is for some people. And that was kind of like my journey with that for a long time, getting on the pill, being depressed on the pill, and just then kind of like deciding to just accept the pain. Until then I realized there was actually a lot of natural ways to deal with all those things. And that has been like a big part of my journey as a woman, of reconnecting and releasing out of my womb years of the trauma of being scared of my own body, and that feeling so disconnected, because that was my reality when other people would just be fine and I could not work or be a human being on the first 2 days, because that was like just my reality. And in terms of connecting with the feminine, it's been all about that, reconnecting deeper with myself, reconnecting with the womb, and just re-experiencing these things in a safe way, of really reconnected with who I am, and just a lot of healing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. So it's amazing to hear your stories, and also because you both have quite different backgrounds and the way as well that you channel what you're trying to give out to the world. And I think it's amazing that even though you have different ways to do it, you come and you're just helping women empower themselves and know themselves better, and also that it's a way for people who maybe need specific things or want to go about it, maybe someone who doesn't feel like they want to go to a moon circle, but actually they can still get something very similar from something that you give, for example, Izzy, from your teaching. So I think that's amazing to have both of you. Izzy, would you be happy just to talk a bit, you started talking about it, but talking more about the menstrual cycle in general, and I know you wanted to take us through visualization as well, if you're happy to.
So normally when I lead workshops, I do quite a long visualization. It's like 10 minutes, and I'm going to do just more like a snapshot of what that would be for you. So you can close your eyes if you want, but no need if you just want to just look down and just listen. So the first thing that I'd like you to just bring into your awareness is just an image of a seed in an imaginary palm, and that hand, your hand in your imagination, is just going to place that seed deep within the ground, and then you're going to water that seed, and just fast forward time and just watch as that seed, after some time of lying still and soaking in all the nutrients from the nourishing earth, it begins to wiggle its little shoot up through the soil, and it breaks through the soil, and its first green shoot reaches up towards the sun, and we see a leaf emerge. It carries on climbing, and maybe some frosts come, and it has to curl back in a little bit, and it's very a new little seedling. But we see that it gains strength as it continues, and then it eventually is strong enough to give blossom to a flower or a bud, whatever you want. And maybe this little seedling makes its way all the way into a tree, or maybe it just stays as a flower. Maybe it's a cactus, I don't know, whatever you want. And then we see it blossom, we see it living its outward life, the bees come pollinate it, and it shines bright. And then there's a shift, and maybe a leaf falls off, or a spine falls to the ground, and it begins to litter the ground around with its debris, and it begins to die and curl in on itself. And eventually it falls and it disintegrates and it goes back to lie on the ground. And then what it was gets covered over with other leaf litter, etc. And the whole of it returns back again to the soil. And the seeds which it grew also return into the soil. And then we might imagine how that seed again would continue, those seeds, which lay on the ground, would continue that cycle once more. And then I also like to bring the image of a moon, dark sky, and a sliver of a moon, and then a half moon, a full moon, and again a half moon, and again a dark sky. And then finally just noticing your own breath, how your breath naturally, without you having to do anything, comes in and out, and that there's a little, almost imperceptible pause at the bottom, and then at the top of the breath as well. And you can open your eyes. The reason I like to do that is just to bring awareness to the fact that we are all living within and through natural cycles, and that we all recognize what a cycle is, and the different phases of it as well. Because whatever thing, or being, or plant, or whatever, is going through that cycle, it always goes through, you can describe it in different ways, but like a period of stillness, silence, emptiness, growth, or birth, blossoming, life, and then dying, death, and then again, after that period of, I feel I can get stuck in a cycle, like saying it. I'm like, you got it. And yeah, and it's interesting to notice if there are parts of those cycles which you might label as good or as most appealing, most desirable, and then parts which you maybe have resistance to or think are the bad parts or even have fear towards. And so we can recognize then that the menstrual cycle is just another example of one of those cycles. And it's so often we bring a lot of attention to the most obvious parts of the cycle, so period, bleeding, it's a big event that's happening. And we also have the event of ovulation within the cycle. And this cycle, what is so potent about it is that it is the way which, when we connect with the both ovulation and menstruation and everything in between, it can, if we choose it, give us a blueprint for how we can create life. And when I say create life, I don't mean necessarily giving birth, but that is one thing that it represents. But also giving life to your ideas, giving life to your calling, your whatever you want to call that, your purpose, your creative endeavors. So I would call it a blueprint and a map to, if you choose to go with it, it makes your life easier. Fun.
Would you be happy, just very quickly, but just to say, because I think that we know this, but maybe not everyone knows it, even though maybe they know it within, but what are the moments, like the key moments in the cycle, and just, I guess, the basic things of, having to rest during your period and...
So, the main rule is that it's no one can tell you how you should feel, but I like to kind of, I mean, I'll go through it kind of as a structure, but knowing that there's movement and, you know, your own choices within that structure. There's this concept of inner seasons, which was conceived of by Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer. They talk about the inner seasons as a structure. So we have inner winter would be our time of menstruation, bleeding. Inner spring is the phase from after you stop bleeding to up towards your ovulation time. Inner summer is ovulatory time. Inner autumn is your luteal phase as you move towards menstruation again, and then inner winter. So there are different kind of archetypal energies that come with the seasons, as we know. Like, we all know that, you know, spring, fresh energy, you know, exciting. The lambs are frolicking. So the structure is about going with those archetypal energies, which are there because of the hormones that we have going that create that cycle, basically. And so it's quite safe to say that some of the ways that we feel are quite universal for having a cycle. So even though you have your own experience, when, for example, after you finish bleeding, you have a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, it's literally stimulating something in your body. So that can be felt also emotionally with this like stimulating feeling as you come out of your bleed. Spring-like, you're like emerging again. And then as we move towards ovulation, and it's an inner summer, ovulation, of course, is the moment when your body is wanting to reproduce. So how that relates to a feeling of summer, like socializing, going out with your friends, being like more sexy, being more able to connect outwardly with others and with the world. And then in the autumn, how do we feel about autumn in the world? Like, often like, oh no, I want to stay in summer. So this shift, I always find it difficult to talk about the shift from inner summer and ovulation into inner autumn, because for me it's like very real in terms of my own journey, because I experience what you might describe as PMS, and I don't like to describe it as PMS, but like it's a challenging time for me, so I'm like, every time I talk about it I feel different about it. But there's challenge in autumn, because it's a slowing down from summer. It's a moving inward and moving towards menstruation. So this building, growing sense of inner spring and summer, there can be a sense of like a very potent shift energetically from ovulation into the second half of your cycle. And it's very misunderstood by the world, but like, maybe we can talk about this later, because I think this is important, this like premenstrual thing. But there's power in it too, because I think of it as like a returning to myself. Like, okay, maybe I feel less external and confident, but what is there within within me that I'm returning to as I go to my menstruative cave, as my inner. Yeah, I don't want to talk. My brother. I'm carrying on. Interesting. So interesting that like when I talk about this part of the cycle, I get like. It's easier to talk about spring and summer. and then in the winter, a field must lie fallow for some time in order to give life to plants and etc. This is how I think of menstruation and time of bleeding, is like a very potent place for lying empty and fallow in order for you to regather yourself and re-nourish yourself in order to return back into spring and summer. And I think that is the key misunderstood and powerful thing about the menstrual cycle, which is so hard but so potent, is that it is about how do we respect rest in this world.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a bit more after this, because I think it's such a huge thing within the structure that we live in. Thank you so much.
Thank
for that.
you.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as well because you talk about, when we hit, I guess, winter, for example, and then in some ways it's so important to mark those moments, whether it's through rest or through things that you do, Desiree, like moon circles and things like that, and that whole sense of ritual and celebration, and that, for example, that we don't have when we have our menarche, which is the first period. It's called a menarche. And in some cultures it's celebrated and it becomes a huge thing, and I don't know about you, but me, it was very swept on the rug, like, okay, this is happening and I don't really know what's going to happen next, what it means, how it's going to play out in my life. And Desiree, how do you see, for you, it's important to have those moments of marking, these rituals. What's the importance of women gathering together in those moments and sharing? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so it is extremely important to mark those moments, and actually the first type of ways of marking time that have been found with archaeology was through the marking of 28 days. And 28 days is normally the amount of time that is a normal cycle. And that is also the time of the cycle of the moon. So for women, or for anyone that bleeds, it's so important to connect with the energy of the moon and to start to recognize that as we go through this cycle, the moon does as well. And you can start to use the moon to help you as well connect deeper with your own cycle and help it with mapping what phase are you in, and see, is there a shift coming within you? If maybe you start bleeding from the full moon, you switch and go to the new moon. What does that mean for you? And what does it mean if you connect with the energies of what the new moon and full moon are? So it's very important to gather together as women, and that is for many reasons. I think we've been very much missing that community, that feeling of being connected as a village. And yes, we can have friends, but sometimes it's, we won't go to our friends with certain issues, sometimes for fear of being too much or not wanting to bother about certain things. But when we gather together with other women, and most of the times it might be women that you don't know at that time, it gives you this empowering of just being there and having space held for you. And no matter no matter who you are, no matter how you are, you can come to these spaces being you without having to put up an act or put a mask on. You just get accepted for who you are. And the importance of these circles is then you get to experience what it means to connect with other women. When society, how it is right now, I think all of us have gone through moments where we've been feeling like competition. We've been, oh, this woman is like this, so I need to try and be like that, or feeling like you're not good enough because someone else has those characteristics that you would like. And actually, when we connect in circle this way, what happens is you realize the things that you might be going through, they are going through as well. And so it's important when we connect in these times. And what used to happen, these were practices that have been there from the beginning of times of women connecting together. What used to happen then, their periods would start to sink. And then you would have these villages, all these women connected through the same time of their period. And the beauty of that, of just that knowledge of being strong that way all together, and from learning from each other. So when we mark these times and connect with the moon, we can really reconnect with our feminine energy, reconnect with our body, feeling safe, and feeling like someone is holding a safe space around you to be exactly who you are without feeling that you're going to be judged or feeling like you're not good enough. And so this is very important. And yeah, like I feel like I had the same experience of when my first period came. It was like, okay, you're a woman. Like, okay, what do I do now? Does this happen every month? What do I do? And it's again, it's also, I feel like there needs to be more of a celebration and also an understanding of how can we connect deeper with that, and how can we help the next generation to not having to go through pain if there's pain. Because I think about my family. My mom also always had very bad periods, and my grandmother used to faint from the pain. And again, this was like, this is how it is, and it does not have to be. And when we actually have circles where we connect with other women and we share these experiences, especially when I do ceremonies just on the womb, we have these moments where we are like, oh, this is not normal. You're describing all things that are not normal. So what can we do? What remedies are there to change that for you? Because when you connect and actually see, like, there's a room where 10 women have all experienced extreme pain, that's not normal. So like, okay, what can we do to help with that? So I feel like when we gather, we get to experience these things deeper and just realize, okay, like, there's things that can be shifted. I'm not alone in this, especially.
Yeah. Do you think that there are ways for someone maybe who's more, who's more worried about going to something so intimate as a moon circle? Are there ways to just mark that time on your own? Maybe just by, as you're saying, Izzy, just resting, just take like an hour to sit and rest, or do you feel like there are other ways as well?
Yeah. If you're worried about going to women's circle, first of all, I just want to speak about that. It's normal. When I went to my first one, I didn't want to go, and I think until 10 minutes before I was sure that I wasn't going to go. And I really felt like I'm just going to be judged by all these other women. They're just going to look at me and think I'm a fraud or whatever. And I left feeling more connected to this group of women that I never met. And just feeling like, wow, that was amazing. And we all deserve to feel like that. Also, there are some very powerful men's circles as well, so you should all go to them. They're very important and needed. But yes, there are amazing things that we can do on our own, and I'll probably talk about it a bit more with the Yoni steaming, but there are such important, like just spending that time for rest. do while we are bleeding is so important. And I think in this society we're told a lot about like, you can do it all, like, you know, all the commercials of like, yeah, if you have a tampon you can do it all. You actually need to rest. You actually need to like slow down. And I just cringe when I see, you know, a lot of videos about women being on their period and like forcing themselves to the gym like crazy. Like, you should slow down. Your body is not the same while you are like that. You shouldn't push yourself too hard just because you think that you should. So also taking that time to connect with the moon during that time, again, following those cycles is just so important.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to talk about rest, because and just acknowledge like how hard it can be and that it can feel really uncomfortable. Sometimes we expect like, oh wow, I'm gonna rest, and then you like lay down, and the minute that you lay down, you're with your thoughts then, right? And if you're struggling with stress, with anxiety, with anything that many of us are, it's like immediately kind of it starts going in your head, and that's why we often reach for distraction, and can find it like super challenging to rest. Well, that's my experience. And so I like to just acknowledge that, because otherwise you can suddenly feel like it's another like, oh, I'm supposed to be resting during my period, and then it becomes another just like thing that you can then beat yourself up about if you didn't rest. But there are amazing resources out there for like helping you to calm your nervous system, basically, so that you can for like 10 minutes sit and be comfortable with your thoughts. Meditation practices, shout out to Yoga Nidra, it's my favourite thing ever. And something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, that I love the idea that, because often what can happen is, especially if you have a challenging premenstrual time, where you experience depression, anxiety symptoms, then you begin your bleed, and it's like a major relief because that's over. And so then you're like filled with energy and you're ready to go again. Think of that rising of energy as like, okay, I'm going to store this energy for myself for the rest of my cycle. So try, rather than immediately using that energy when you get your period. And again, this might be comfortable, like holding back and creating like a space, honouring that basically, that yes, I'm bleeding and I'm gonna, whatever that looks like for you, just holding back and thinking, this is me, like I'm storing this energy for me rather than like for giving it out.
It's so, because we could go so deep into this, you know, all the energies within the cycle, and I think you've both already touched them. But sometimes this is something that I've been aware of, where I think that when you're socialized as a female, it can be quite a negative thing, or it can have negative connotations, so unreliable and weak and emotional, which are all sort of tied into the menstrual cycle. And sometimes I'm aware when I'm speaking about this, thinking about this, reading about this, that it can sound quite anti-feminist in a way, because we need to be equal as men. We're as strong as men, and so many amazing women have fought for equality, and they fought to have equal rights. And then the fact then to start talking about biology again, and that brings the conversation back down. And I was speaking to a friend a female friend who is like a C-level has a C-level job, is super successful within the world we live in. And she was saying how she really struggled to understand how she could be a powerful woman, because did it mean being a man in a suit, like a man in a suit, or did it mean really embodying her own power as a woman and really using that power? And I think that kind of, what I ask myself is, what does actually feminine power mean? Like what is it different, and how are we just not weaker than men, I guess, in a way? For either of you.
I think it takes a kind of embodied realization of of the power that you have cyclically. I think it's a long process, because I think that all of that is so present. But I think it takes courage and it takes trust to practice living and working and being powerful in a cyclical way, because definitely at first it's going to feel lazy, it's going to feel unproductive, it's going to feel just wrong, because we don't live in a world that honours cyclicality and all of those phases that I was speaking about. We live in a world that honours the spring-summer side of the cycle and expects a linear upwards trajectory of production and continuous ongoing doing. And I mean, first of all, that's not sustainable. So when we return to practicing doing the external stuff, and then also really doing the not doing, like I said, it's going to feel wrong. But once we've had the embodied understanding of how much easier that makes our life, I think that's how we, and also, well, not easier, but easier, but also how we can then bring our ideas and our life into being in a sustainable way, and a way that's we're not going to burn out. Then it's like you can't go back from that, because you're like, well, this is how I live now. Like this cyclical way, it might still be difficult because it's not reflected in the world, but having that embodied understanding of like, okay, when I rest at my period, when I honour my premenstrual phase as a time of slowing down, I can return back to the world and to my life and to my dreams and my success so much more replenished and grounded, and I don't burn out. And yeah, that answers it.
I guess also it makes me think of the idea of meditation, where it might seem like you're doing something so unproductive when you're just sitting there listening, but actually it's going to help you for the rest of your day. So it's, I guess, like when you have your period, the idea of resting, taking that time to really interiorize, that's actually going to help you for the rest of the cycle. So what seems like a waste of time is actually a way to replenish yourself.
I just want to mention about cycles for a second, because no matter if you are in touch with your feminine cycle or not, we are all, unless you're used to these practices, we're all men and women disconnected from the cycle of nature, and that is another cycle that we are actually meant to embrace, and we're not. And that is why when we get to the winter time, we are burned out, we get more depressed, we feel like in this dark energy, because we're not embracing that actually that is the time for us to all slow down. No matter if you're bleeding or not, that is the time where we rest, we hibernate. we are meant to experience the winter as a winter where we slow down. Instead, what we keep doing is need to meet all my friends, need to meet all the family, need to not stop, and then I stop for a second, and then our work is back, and then I get super depressed. So when we actually take the time to slow down and then embrace the different seasons, so okay, now we're in spring, so like things can reawaken and I can like start new things and see where that take me. And then in summer, let's be busy, let's feel that rush of energy. But when it's autumn, like we actually start to slow down and nourish ourselves more and see how through that things change within us. And then the question was about the
just feminine power, what that means, I guess.
So feminine power for me is when a woman is truly connected to themselves and to their body. And both men and women have feminine energy within them, and men sometimes tend to like shy away from it with this idea, again because of how society brought us up, that men need to be strong, they can't show emotions, they can't show pain, and they just need to be in a certain way. But instead we all need to embrace that feminine energy. For women, that is a lot more important, and it's all with the connection to the body. We are so disconnected to our body, we're so disconnected from our womb, and that's our main space for power and strength and creation of, as you were saying, everything, all our ideas, all our passions, everything is created there. And this feminine power, when we're truly connected with it, that's where we also become the nourishing leaders that are needed in our society and in the groups of people around us. The nourishing feminine is needed, and that is something that is very powerful. So when we connect with those cycles within ourselves and connect with this power, that's when we can really experience things differently. And embracing the feminine power can bring massive shifts in your life of just, really not taking any crap anymore. Because I feel like sometimes we take a lot of crap on and we make ourselves smaller, but when we are in that feminine power, we know our value, we know who we are, and we embrace it. And by that we can help others, other women do the same.
I wanted to ask you, Izzy, to talk a bit more about your work, because also thinking, we talked about, and you talked about hormonal contraception and how I guess in a way it's been a way for us to be equal as men, but it's made us sort of suppress what it means to be a woman. So it's kind of like we've had to give up something to be within this world that we live in. And I know that was part of your journey with FAM, and would you be happy to talk a bit about FAM, just explain, because I think it's quite very interesting to hear about that as well.
I guess in terms of, I think my role as a fertility awareness method educator is just as much as possible to say like, hey, this is a valid option for birth control, because rather than going into the pill and all, like that's a whole other conversation, and it's also a place where like many things are true at one time and there's not a right or wrong answer, and it's very nuanced, because everyone has, everyone has choice. A lot of people don't have choice, and that's the issue. So it's about me saying this is also a choice for you, and What was the question? Like, just
say
more about it.
Just with, I mean, again, that is also a huge topic unto itself. So maybe you don't want to explain everything, but I guess up to you. You don't have to, but if you want to explain just the basics of how it works, or not, because that's you can. People can also just find you afterwards to find out more about it. So
I mean, it's a way of determining when you're fertile and when you're infertile, and it works on the basis of understanding how your hormones represent themselves through physical signs, such as your body temperature and your cervical mucus and your cervical position, be the main three things. And there are other physical signs of what your hormones are doing, which manifest themselves when we pay attention. People always say that humans don't show when they're fertile or not, like baboons, because I think baboons get like a big butt or something. But there are ways of determining when we're fertile or not, and people with menstrual cycles are not fertile 100% of the time, which is something that we are like, I only realised when I started this journey, and is huge, like believing that you're fertile every single day, and the kind of fear-mongering around sex between man and a woman, especially when we're younger, of like, you will get pregnant and die. Versus like, oh, there's only around 8 days in my cycle that I can get pregnant. Like, what does that open up then as well, if a person chooses to then conceive as well? Often what happens is we're told at first, you can get pregnant any day of a cycle, and then we go to try and make a baby, and it's like, oh, it's probably going to take you like 2 years, and that's just an example of like how that empowered education is just taken away from us, and it's just really not okay that we don't know and we're not taught about our bodies in this way. And also like how my life might have been different if when I was 14, 15, 16 I had a basic understanding of, oh, I have a lot of estrogen for 2 weeks and then a lot of progesterone for 2 weeks. Those hormones make you feel very different, and so I might have understood a little bit more why I feel the way I do, and be able to have so much more compassion for myself, because instead what it was I'm crazy and I'm wrong and I'm broken because I feel okay for 2 weeks and then I feel like, and this kind of not myself thing, oh, let me just get back to myself, versus a feeling of like, all of this is me, and like truly accepting and loving myself for all the iterations that I am, and not expecting myself to be the same every single day. And the bonus of being able to have sex. I'm not pregnant.
We're just talking about kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, just about the trauma that we can carry, and that's what you do as well, Desiree. You do Yoni steaming, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about that, and also about just pain in general, because we did talk about that. We did touch about touch on it. And I know it can be slightly esoteric when you get into that. I mean, it can sound quite far-fetched in a way, but in my personal experience it wasn't, because my pain just went. But I guess, what is it for you, and what is that trauma that we carry?
So it's a lot. So in terms of what I do, I combine the Yoni steaming and womb healing. And what I realized that a lot of women are extremely disconnected with their womb and extremely disconnected from their cycle, and just need to reconnect with that. And sometimes even just that reconnection will be extremely powerful. Now, we as women, we carry a lot of energy in a womb, and that's something that we don't realize. Even all the times that we can be negative towards ourselves or get really stressed and angry, we all pull it into our womb. So all those times that you even were like, oh shit, I'm on my period. I don't want to be on my period right now. And putting that energy in there again. Past partners that energetically might still be with us in one way because we haven't fully released them. And of course, more intense trauma that a lot of women experience. And so we can store all that, and we need to find a way to release it. Now, when we are stressed and maybe our body hurts, we might have a hot bath, and that's how we release all that and relax, and they'll feel good. But there's nothing really that we do for our womb. And so when you introduce these things like Yoni steaming and shamanic journeying into the womb, and you working on releasing those things, it can be really amazing. And that's why I started all this. I started it all because of myself, because I was tired of all the pain. And the first time that I found out about Yoni steaming, I said, that's bullshit. I said, that's some Gwyneth Paltrow stuff. No.
What is it?
I'll tell you in a second. And then through my shamanic studies, there was an expert panelist that I ended up studying for many years with for Yoni steaming. And I was like, okay, what she's saying makes a lot of sense, but I still don't want to do this. This sounds stupid. And then I tried it, and once I started to really see the benefits, I was angry. I was so angry that something so easy was solving all my issues, and that I had to experience all that pain, all those issues for my whole life. And only now, in the past few years, all those issues are gone because of this simple thing. So let me tell you about what Yoni steaming is. Yoni steaming, vaginal steaming, is the introduction of steam, hot water, with herbs. And basically sitting comfortably above a pot with these herbs and the steam, and allowing for that heat to travel into your body. And through our body, that heat rises and creates circulation in our body. And that circulation activates different things that our womb needs. So it's an amazing practice that might feel like, that sounds like crazy, but this is something, first of all, that has been done for forever. There's literally traces of this being done all over the world. Before we had internet and people could connect of I'm doing this, are you doing this? There were traces of this in all different cultures. And these were the ways that women knew how to help each other. And so with that also comes the fact that, I don't really want to get into gynecology and how gynecology started, but does anyone know how it actually started? No? Yeah, I figured you probably knew, but the person that created gynecology was someone that owned slaves and used those female slaves, cutting them up until one didn't die. And that's how gynecology started with, I'm gonna keep trying to do something until she doesn't die. And that's, oh, okay, this helps. And before that, women knew how to give birth to children, how to help with all different issues. And then this became a thing that only men could do, teaching women how to do something that they knew from the beginning. And that's how gynecology started. So the Yoni steaming is going back to a practice that is actually very natural. And I just want to really quickly say different things that it can help with. It can help with pain, it can help with irregular periods, it can help with if your cycle is too long or too short. It can help if you experience clots. It can help with any sort of issues that you might be experiencing, and the emotional imbalances, the PMS, or whatever we want to call it, or anything, just putting you back in connection with your womb. So that's basically what it is. And the importance is of really doing it with someone that is trained, so they can advise you on the right herbs and the right formulation for you, so that you're doing it safely, because that's very important. There are some contraindications, but not like the main one, don't steam while you're bleeding, because the heat will just open up more and you'll bleed more. But it's this practice that is amazing, and especially amazing to even release any trauma. I know I went on a big tangent, but
half asking, half saying, is it okay to, if you want to start doing it but you feel like overwhelmed by herbs and not knowing about that, you can just do it with water, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. I would still recommend that you have a consultation with someone trained, because there are certain things that are not even about your cycle that might be affecting your body. So for example, if you suffer from heat in your body, of just being really hot, it's better for you to do a certain amount of steaming instead of and you might think no, I really want to get that heat in, so I'm going to do more, but actually for your body, maybe 10 minutes is best. So for example, I have a lot of heat in my body and I can only do 10 minutes. But when I first started, I was like, let me do this 20, and I was like, why is this not helping as it should? It's making me worse. But yeah, definitely just with water can be done, and again, someone trained can tell you the temperature, what you're looking for, when it's safe to do it. But generally, whenever I see scaremongering articles about a woman burned her vagina by steaming, and I'm like, really? Because you don't feel when something is hot and you decide, I'm gonna sit on this and just go through the pain. No, you can feel when a bath is too hot, and your body will tell you the same thing. But yeah, you can definitely do it with just water. But when you introduce herbs, it can be so much more healing and powerful.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for the work that you do, because it's really amazing. It's really inspiring to hear. And Izzy, you asked our first question. But yeah, I think we're going to open, if anyone has any questions. I know we've talked about a lot of things. But yeah, Sal.
So if you are a person that suffers from very painful periods, you mentioned about steaming, what are some other steps that would try and shift that into sort of a normal sort of pattern?
Yeah, so apart from the steaming, if let's say they don't want to try steaming, connecting with herbs. There's so many herbs that are amazing for pain and amazing to nourish the body. Basically, when we are going through a period, we are creating a lot of extra blood to release all that. And what we don't realize, our body needs a lot more nourishment, and we sometimes don't give it. But when we introduce herbs, some for pain, some for nourishing the body, that already can bring massive healing benefits. So working with herbs in terms of just drinking them as teas can be amazing. What I also suggest during period, of course, the first 2 days, rest as much as you can, slowing down, and not drinking anything cold or having cold food. That already will bring massive changes. I used to always crave ice cream, and I'm still sometimes like, okay, I'm gonna drink this very cold thing, but like I'm sure it'll be fine. And then you start to notice, oh, I'm cramping up more. I wonder why. And I had some clients that were like, I'm gonna test that, and then we're like, okay, you were right. I was like, no. But yeah, so like working with herbs can be very beneficial.
Are the herbs specific to the person, or is there some herbs that are generally it's very good to have?
In general, there are. It's best to always work with someone that can tell you what the specific herbs are that you should have, because you want to look at the whole, not just at. It's not just. I think with medicine we go like, take this painkiller for the headache. With herbs we look at like, this is a small thing. What is the whole body? So there's certain things, certain herbs that you want to check of like, okay, maybe this one is best for you than this other one. But there are some amazing herbs that can be really beneficial. Passion flower, motherwort, nettle for nourishing, and damiana. Like passion flower and the damiana are amazing to while bleeding and to also like deal with any sort of pain. But yeah, so I would recommend working with herbs in general. Can really bring a lot of healing benefits.
Yeah, just to follow up to that question. So I like to think of pain is often caused by inflammation, and stress. Many things cause inflammation, but stress is a big causer of inflammation. And so, like you're saying, you know, our perspective in Western medicine is like, let me deal with this one symptom and fix it and make it go away. But how can we see how our lifestyle is the whole of our cycle every day to reduce stress? Because it's going to be no good living a very stressful life right up until your period, and then, you know, thinking, okay, let me not be stressed. It's building every day of your cycle towards a stress-free period, and like engaging with what are the stresses in my life, because two people could be living the exact same lifestyle. For one person it's highly stressful, for another person they're at peace with it and it's not stressful. So yeah, stress.
So on a slightly different tangent, I wanted to ask you and come back to the moon phases, because I've always been very, very connected to the moon, especially the full moon. And I was wondering if there is a shift from the full moon to the new moon, like what does that signify? Is there something like in general, or is it more something you should watch out in your life?
So in terms of your bleeding during that, or just in general, like new moon and full moon and connecting? So bleeding, normally I'd say it's more common to sometimes bleed with a full moon, and just it's like the time for release. It's a time to like the slow down and all that. And full moon energy is very much connected to release, to banishing away, to also bring in forgiveness and gratitude, but especially to release and let go. So it's very much then when we bleed with the full moon, it's like it almost feels like more intense and like releasing even more. When we bleed with the new moon, sometimes that's signified as even sort of like a priestess energy, or like a higher energy of just really connecting with your calling at that time. and honoring more what you are meant to do. So sometimes we can bleed with the new moon when we go through that phase of, okay, I'm really looking at what do I want to do, what do I want to create, and just, so that's sometimes. And then new moons and generals are all about manifesting, about calling in, inviting in, and inviting in new cycles for you.
Thank you. And also on the moon, like I think that if you don't have a menstrual cycle, you can use the moon as a way of connecting to cycles, and like just on a practical level, like when we're saying connecting to, a way of connecting is literally just every day noting, okay, where's the moon, what's the moon doing, or what day am I on in my cycle, right? Making a little note in a book, get a cute notebook, and just write a sentence every day about how you're feeling, what your energy's like, what you're drawn towards, what you're drawn away from, and doing that, and then looking back, reading over it, seeing if you can see any patterns, any correlations between what we've spoken about, like the what opportunity there is in that phase that you're in, and seeing, as you continue doing that, that's how you connect, that's how you build. It's very simple. It can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of my clients that have gone through menopause, they actually, I tell them use the moon to reconnect with your body that way and feeling the cycle still. It's very good to map. And then you actually see like, oh, this month I felt more like this. And then like maybe it's because of the stress, maybe it's because of that. And you can actually see like looking back at your whole month that way.
Can I just add as well, also, I think you can do that if you're on a hormonal contraception and you don't get a period, just by tracking your cycle after a few months, you can understand your own cycle, even if you don't get a period.
Izzy, you said that you were on another contraception for quite a long time. How long did it take for you to not only physically see the difference, but also like mentally? At what point after coming off it did you feel more like yourself?
Different for different ones. With the Nuva ring, it was like within a month. I was like, oh, that's what was going on. Okay. And then with the copper coil, it was like an immediate relief because I didn't have pain immediately, and it was at that point such an empowered decision that I just was like, yes, and ready to do the next thing.
What about when you came off? Were you ever on the pill?
Yeah, the pill, I actually don't remember. It was quite a long time ago, and I also, part of the reason I think I subconsciously just hated the pill the whole time, and so I would forget to take it and then have a month not taking it and then go back. It felt very like disjointed, and also like at that point I was not aware of and observing myself deeply at all, so actually I don't know, like I can't really remember, apart from in kind of broad strokes, how I felt, because I wasn't very conscious how I felt.
I can share a bit about that, both in terms of myself and clients. I have a lot of clients that come that have been on the pill and then just feel like that disconnection still. Sometimes it can take a couple of months actually. I think with the pill is actually the one that might take longer, because also you getting back into having like a normal period might take a bit longer. So what I noticed that introducing the steaming actually helps to bring back that reconnection. And in terms personally, it was a couple of months of just feeling like, what is going on? But then there's always like a big shift when you start feeling more like, okay, oh, that's what I was missing, like, which with other contraception types, like, it might feel like very quick. With the pill, it takes a while. And also when you stop taking the pill and you're missing those periods, the steaming can then help bring them back earlier. Because again, it creates circulation, so it moves the blood again.
And if you're preparing to come off the pill or you're wanting to in the future, there are things that you can do to like support yourself before. I'm not a herbalist or anything, so I'm not going to say what they are, but like to do a bit of research about what nutrients you might be low on, so that you can build yourself up before you come off the pill, which could speed up your regulation. But yeah, just knowing that it's normal for it to take a few months to come back, and just not getting caught into a cycle of stressing about when's my period going to get regular again, because that is only going to perpetuate it, not regulating. So just calm.
You first. You had your hand up. You had your hand up.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about like the importance of your seasons, having like autumn, summer, spring, winters. So I'm just curious, like, being in tune with that, can you like intuitively tell when you meet people what kind of season they're in? And where and like, is that something that comes into your psyche, and like, do you adapt your behaviour accordingly?
That's a great question. I have, and I think this leads so well into like women's circles and gathering, because I have a few friends who track their cycle in the same way that I do. We have a shared language about it, so when I meet that friend, our first question is, where are you in your cycle? And so immediately then I'm like, okay, you're in autumn, I'm in my summer, okay, I'm probably going to do most of the talking, and that's cool. But yeah, like having that shared language and awareness that we are all changeable beings, like we all are, just like, it's such a relief, because like what I've struggled with before is like, oh my god, I can't go to this social event because like a week ago I was like really bubbly and and now I'm like, don't want to talk to anyone, and so everyone's thinking I'm weird. But like, just building this awareness that like it's okay to turn up different every day, and I think that's what's also powerful about gathering in women's circles and spaces like that, is being able to show up exactly how you are, and that of course we all accept each other, and we're so much less judgmental than like, we always think others are more judgmental than they are, but just having that like basic understanding of like, it's okay to just be wherever you are, show up however you are.
Yeah, I think I don't know, I really sense energy from people, so I think like when I connect with someone, sometimes I can feel like, I think this person's like, it's feeling like this right now. But I think I see it so much in the circles, like the way we communicate with each other. Like again, if someone is like a bit more quiet, or someone is a bit more open, or feeling a bit more emotional, we just connect with each other's energies and can feel like, okay, this person is now going through this phase, and this person, might feel like more embodied and more sensual and, more euphoric, and so like we can tell a bit more the more that we connect with each other that way.
Alexander, do you have like a specific way of tracking your cycle? Like, do you use any apps, or did you start off by using any apps?
Right, well, there's many ways to do it. So starting off, personally, I started off literally just in my notebook, writing down day one, this is how I feel, and that's how I begun it. And then it's still a continuing journey of just how I feel like tracking it. So once I added in fertility awareness method, so cycle awareness, menstrual cycle awareness would be just the kind of like writing down how you feel, and you can obviously do that whatever way works best for you. But when you add in fertility awareness method, FAM, you need somewhere to record your temperatures, and you have a graph. So that you need to have either a chart that you can like print out. So when I teach it, I have a chart that I send people to print, old school. Or you can have an app. There are many apps, and I don't believe at all in having a predictive app that's going to predict for you any fertile times. Partly because it can get it wrong.
Yeah, because I know of Daisy and of natural cycles. I use natural cycles, but do you think that's not safe?
Yeah, they can get it wrong. But the main thing that I feel about those predictive apps is that it takes away your opportunity to really know it yourself.
Yes.
And so when you learn FAM, from a book, from an educator, you're getting that knowledge that is just like, then you're not relying on an app, and that's amazing. So there's an app called Read Your Body, which has no prediction, and it's made for and by FAM users, and it's basically just having a notebook, but with a chart, and it's on your phone, so I really recommend that one. But yes, like sometimes I just draw out my chart in a notebook if I feel like being old school and having it written down on paper. At the moment I'm using Read Your Body to record, but yeah, that's my take on apps.
Nice.
Thank you guys. That was really awesome, and thank you for being so open. It kind of always inspires, I guess, the room to be really open. We've spoken a lot about cycle and kind of linked it to the seed and the moon and the breath, and how it's such an awesome vehicle for women to connect to that universal cycle through our period, and how that means we have ups and downs mentally. And I can't help to wonder what the guys in the room think, and do you relate to feeling like that at all? Or just generally open up the floor if you feel like speaking about this, and how you've taken in this whole conversation. And you might not want to. It might be a thing to want.
Something actually got brought to my attention, a passage from a guy recently, from a partner actually, but about the sort of the misunderstanding of men around this time of period for women, and how we go into this sort of like generational sort of like ingrained sort of perspective of like the women should respond and deal with things the way men do, which is sort of like just crack on and sort of just deal with the situation and just sort of and just push through that kind of endurance sort of mentality. And it's like I just think from a men's perspective, it's like I've got pals who kind of, they talk about sort of that period with their partners, and they talk about the men, and they dread it, and they tiptoe around this sort of like period where they look at the woman or their partner as at that time sort of either sort of a little bit sort of hot-headed or a little bit angry, and it's sort of like to sort of change this narrative of how we look at that time, this period, because it's like this sort of low-level sort of dominance that a man has around that time. And you look at the woman and who's obviously in her most vulnerable, and it's like, rather than sort of kind of being distant with it around that period, which a lot of like friends that I know, and even I've definitely fell into that trap myself, of kind of not really knowing how to deal with the situation around that time of the month. and not letting them feel heard and letting them feel safe around that time. And yeah, I just find I do it, and I know I've got a lot of men who do it who, yeah, they kind of just look at the perspective as sort of like in a different way that a woman did, you know. And I think it's important that from a men's perspective to honour this time, maybe celebrate this time and at that period for a woman, and support her in her rest rather than sort of distance, you know. Because I see it, you know, a lot of guys in relationships. I've got a good friend of mine and at work, and he always talks about this time of the month for his partner who really struggles, and he's just like, oh, I don't know how to deal with it. It's like, you know, and it's just like, and it's like, I get it, and so many men do it, you know, and it's just like, I just think it's important to kind of really have these conversations with your partner, you know, like, and for them to understand it, but more important for men to understand it too, because then you know how to navigate that situation and allow them to feel safe, and then there's no disconnection between you and your partner, you know, in that sense. So, yeah, I don't know. Like for me,
I think you nailed it. Like feeling safe and helping someone to feel safe, and I think that's like open questions. You know, what do you need? What can I do? And also, you said celebrating. Like so often, it's like, oh, shame, you're on your own period. Yeah. What about the congrats?
Hello, thank you for all of your wisdom. It really made me think about my goddaughter, and she's only 7, but I was 10 when I had my first period. And it really scares me when I look at her and I think, wow, I was so young, and it really just slapped me around the face. Like, I hated the idea of being a woman because I wasn't. I was even a teenager. I just wondered if there was any advice on like how to approach it with someone who is just coming on their period, or young people. I don't know if you have any resources or just good starting points for approaching.
Well, yeah, I think bringing in that celebration of it and really helping them see that it's not a chore, and that it's a beautiful thing, can really shift it for them. And bringing in a ceremony of celebration, whether you do it with someone that's trained or whether you just do it with, you know, like close family, and just all the women coming together for that, telling their stories, telling their experiences. And I think as well, you know, there's a lot of red tents and a lot of just information out there that you can find from red tents, that it's all about going through that first period, that can really help, and how to celebrate it, whether you do that with you know, with a facilitator or by yourself. Yeah, so I really advise on that, bringing in that celebration, because I think it's like not about bringing in that dread, like now you have it every month, because like you're already like, oh my god, but instead like, oh my god, like this is amazing, look at your body is flourishing, and let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate that your body is working the way it's meant to work, and that you're getting more in touch with your body of how it's meant to grow, and you're getting more in touch with your power. So bringing all that type of energy can really bring many, many shifts. And I think what is also important to just, bringing this safe space to like, we can reach out and like reach out if there's like, you're feeling pain, let's talk about it, let's go deeper, let's make them being heard, because I think it's so easy for us to not be heard from a doctor, and let's not have the new generation have that same problem. So like if the doctor doesn't want to listen, let's go to the herbalist. If the herbalist doesn't want to listen, which normally the herbalist always listens, but let's go to acupuncture. Like, let's try all these different things that can help, because it shouldn't be a case of like, this is it, just endure it or go on the pill.
So I was like, okay, trendsetter. But I think a big part of why I am like so called to this work is because when I started my periods, I have an older sister and a much younger sister, but my mum, for all three of us, she, around the time when she thought that maybe we were going to start, she like reached out to the women in my family and like in my close community, and she just asked them to like give a little gift, and she put it all in a box. And then so when I said like, oh, I think it's happened, she just sat down with me and with my older sister who'd had it at her time 2 years before, and we just like ate chocolate and just opened the little things in the box, and like I got presents, and I just felt like, despite all the weirdness, like I felt very uncomfortable with the word woman. I was like, I don't want that, but at least I had the association with that it was a thing to celebrate, and I felt really held and like also a bit weird, like, oh, now all the women in my family know I'm starting my period. But from my perspective now, as I've got older, I'm like, wow, that really must have been a formative thing, and now I'm like, oh, look where I am now. Maybe.
Thank you so much. I think if you have any more questions, we can ask them separately because it's already quite late. And I'm going to send out an email with lots of resources and where you can find Izzy and Desiree, because I'm sure you have lots more questions. But I want to say thank you so much to you all.